The cold wind howled across the barren, frozen plains of Zithera 9, carrying with it a bitter chill that seemed to seep into the bones of anyone who dared walk the planet's surface. Ice crystals sparkled in the faint light of the distant sun, casting long shadows that danced across the jagged rocks. Amid this desolation, one figure moved slowly, her steps careful and hesitant. Lyria, an alien mother, knelt beside a small, lifeless form partially buried in the snow. Her long, silvery limbs trembled as she brushed away the frost that clung to her child's fragile body. The child's skin shimmered faintly in the dim light, a soft, pearlescent glow that now seemed dull and cold. Lyria's large, luminous eyes, capable of seeing in the dark and through subtle heat signatures, were now wet with tears. She rocked the small body gently, whispering words that carried no sound to the human ears, words of comfort, of sorrow, of regret. Around her, the alien village lay quiet, shrouded in a permanent twilight that the planet's thick atmosphere created. Domed habitats, crafted from a translucent material that shimmered like frozen water, sat in clusters across the icy landscape. A few other aliens watched from a distance, their forms tall and elegant, their movements deliberate. None approached. None could help. Lyria's species, the Vitherians, were delicate and ethereal. Their bodies, though beautiful, were fragile, incapable of surviving the harsh environments without protection. Their children were even more vulnerable. The elders had tried every method known to them, every ancient technique passed down for generations, but nothing could restore life to the small, silent body in Lyria's arms. Her grief was complete, and yet somewhere deep inside, a tiny ember of hope refused to die. That ember stirred when a distant rumble broke the frozen silence. Lyria looked up, squinting through the icy haze. A shape appeared on the horizon, moving clumsily across the snow. It was unlike anything the Vitherians had seen before. It was a human, a being of solid form and strange resilience, wearing thick layers of protective clothing that glinted in the faint light. Humans were rare here, almost legendary in Vitherian memory, and most of the stories told about them spoke of their recklessness, their loudness, and their unpredictable nature. The human approached slowly, holding his hands up in a gesture of peace. Lyria instinctively took a step back, shielding her child. The human's movements were careful, deliberate. He was not armed. His face, partially obscured by a mask and goggles, showed a calm determination. "I don't mean any harm," he said in a language Lyria did not understand, but somehow through his tone, his body language, she sensed truth. She hesitated, torn between fear and curiosity. The human knelt a short distance away, keeping his eyes on the child but respecting Lyria's space. From his pack, he produced a small device that hummed softly. It emitted a gentle warmth and tiny lights blinked along its surface. Lyria's senses, heightened beyond human perception, detected something unusual, something alive in intent, not threatening. She watched as the human carefully adjusted the device, his movements precise and practiced. He touched the child's tiny chest, checking for a heartbeat. Lyria held her breath. After a few moments, he looked up at her, pointing to the device, then back to the child. Though she could not understand his words, she saw the meaning in his eyes. He wanted to help. The thought seemed impossible. The child had been gone for hours, perhaps longer. Nothing in Vitherian history spoke of a living being returning after death. Yet there was something in the human, a confidence, a determination, a quiet strength that suggested miracles were possible. Slowly, Lyria extended a hand, letting the human take the child. She watched, trembling, as he placed the baby onto a soft, heated pad connected to the device. The machine emitted a gentle hum, and tiny lights traced patterns across the child's chest. Hours passed. The cold outside seemed endless, but inside this small, glowing area, warmth and light created a sanctuary. Lyria stayed close, watching every movement, listening to every sound. The human worked tirelessly, adjusting settings, monitoring signs, speaking softly in his strange language as if coaxing life itself to return. At one point, the child twitched, then took a shallow, irregular breath. Lyria gasped, covering her mouth with her hand. The human noticed and gave a small nod, a quiet smile hidden behind his mask. He continued his work, patient and unrelenting. Other Vitherians began to gather, curiosity overcoming fear. They watched from a distance, whispers traveling among them. They had never seen anything like this. A human, clumsy and strange, yet resourceful and gentle, was attempting what their most skilled healers could not. bringing a dead child back to life. Time stretched. Night fell. Though on Zithra 9, night was not dark but a perpetual twilight. The wind howled outside, but inside the glowing dome of warmth, life itself seemed to hang on the edge of a blade. Lyria's grief was slowly being replaced by hope, a cautious, fragile hope that trembled in her chest like a newborn flame. Then, almost imperceptibly at first, the child's chest rose again, one small shivering breath, then another. Lyria's eyes widened in disbelief. She leaned forward, her hands hovering over the baby, afraid to touch, afraid to believe. The human noticed and gestured for her to wait. "It's working," he said softly, though she could not understand the words. But the tone, the promise, was clear. Another breath, stronger this time. A faint cooing sound, a life-giving vibration filled the small space. The child's eyes fluttered open, revealing tiny, luminous irises that mirrored Lyria's own. She cried out, a sound that was part relief, part joy, part wonder. The other Vitherians gasped. They whispered among themselves, awe and disbelief written in every movement. A dead child, brought back by the hands of a human. Lyria's heart swelled with emotions she had never felt before. Gratitude, wonder, and a newfound respect for the strange, resilient species before her. She reached out tentatively, and the human, sensing her readiness, carefully placed the baby into her arms. The child stirred, nestling against its mother. Lyria hugged her child tightly, tears streaming down her face, a mixture of sorrow and overwhelming joy. She whispered words of thanks, though she did not know if the human understood them. He stood back, giving her space, watching the miracle he had helped create. For him, it was a moment of quiet satisfaction, a confirmation of what humans were capable of. Not just survival, not just strength, but compassion that transcended worlds. The wind outside continued to howl, but inside the world felt different, warmer, brighter, filled with possibilities. Lyria looked at the human again, her eyes filled with gratitude that no words could fully express. She knew this day would be remembered, not just as the day her child lived again, but as the day she realized that humans, though strange and foreign, could bring hope where none existed. As dawn approached, casting pale light across the frozen plains, Lyria held her child close, the human standing silently beside her. A bond had been formed, one that would stretch beyond words, beyond species, and beyond the limits of what she had ever imagined possible. In the cold and desolate world of Zithra 9, life had returned, and with it, a new understanding of what courage, empathy, and humanity could achieve. And so, in the quiet aftermath, as the baby slept safely in her arms, Lyria whispered softly to the human, "You have given more than life today. You have given hope." The human only nodded, a small smile visible beneath his mask, knowing that actions, more than words, could change the fate of worlds. The night on Zithra 9 was long and bitter, but inside the small dome of warmth, life had returned. Lyria sat with her child nestled against her chest, feeling the tiny heartbeat and the soft warmth of the fragile body. Every movement, every breath reassured her that the impossible had happened. The human, Ethan, as she had learned from the way the device had beeped his name, sat nearby, observing carefully. He did not leave, nor did he speak unnecessarily. He understood that this moment belonged to her and her child, yet his presence was a comfort in itself. The baby stirred again, opening its small eyes and blinking against the soft glow of the dome's light. It cooed quietly, a sound unfamiliar to humans but full of meaning for its mother. Lyria reached out, touching her child's tiny fingers with her own delicate ones, amazed at how life had returned in such a miraculous way. Ethan watched, adjusting the life support device with precise movements, ensuring the baby remained stable. Hours passed, but fatigue did not show on Ethan's face. Humans were remarkable in their endurance, Lyria realized. He seemed tireless, moving with careful efficiency, never hesitating, never giving up. And yet there was a gentleness in him that contrasted with the cold, mechanical precision of his work. He spoke softly, in words she did not understand, but his tone carried reassurance, hope, and patience. The other Vitherians began to approach cautiously, their curiosity overpowering their fear. They had never seen a human work in such a way, using tools and knowledge so different from their own. Some whispered among themselves, while others simply watched, their large eyes reflecting a mixture of awe and skepticism. Lyria understood their thoughts. It was not easy to trust an outsider, especially one from a species known for being unpredictable. Yet here he was, proving that compassion and intelligence could cross the boundaries of species. Ethan noticed their attention and gestured politely, maintaining a respectful distance. He adjusted the device again, monitoring the baby's vital signs, then returned his gaze to Lyria. It was clear that he had not come here to conquer or take, but to help. Lyria felt a flicker of gratitude deep within her. Perhaps this was what humans were capable of. Acts of courage that had no expectation of reward, acts of kindness that could change the course of lives. As the baby grew stronger, Lyria spoke softly to her child in the melodic tones of her language. The baby responded with tiny coos, and even though Ethan could not understand the words, he watched the interaction with interest. He seemed to understand that this bond, this connection between mother and child, was as important as any medicine or device he could provide. Lyria glanced at him and nodded, silently asking if he thought the baby would survive. Ethan's eyes crinkled slightly in a smile. Though she could not read human expressions fully, she sensed reassurance. His hands moved deftly, adjusting the machine and checking the child's warmth and breathing. Every action was precise yet careful, as if life itself depended on his attentiveness, which in a way it did. The hours turned into what felt like a night without end. Outside, the wind continued to scream across the icy plains, rattling the domes and carrying flakes of snow that glinted like tiny stars. Inside, however, the world felt warmer, safer, and alive with possibility. Lyria noticed that the baby's skin had regained some of its soft glow. Its breathing was steady, more confident, more alive. Ethan spoke again quietly, explaining his next steps, though the words were foreign. Lyria listened, sensing the meaning behind his tone. He intended to stabilize the baby fully before leaving, ensuring that she could continue to care for it safely. The process required patience, precision, and understanding of both human and Vitherian physiology. Lyria marveled at his knowledge. Humans were clever, far beyond what her people had imagined. As the night wore on, Lyria found herself talking to Ethan, not with words, but with gestures, nods, and small expressions. She offered food, water, and warmth, which he accepted politely, showing the same respect and patience he had shown the child. She realized that humans were not only intelligent, but adaptable. They could learn quickly, understand foreign needs, and respond with empathy. The baby began to respond more actively, reaching tiny hands toward Lyria's face, trying to grasp her fingers. Lyria laughed softly, a sound of joy she had not felt since the child's birth. The other Vitherians murmured in surprise. They had not expected such a fragile being to show signs of strength so quickly, nor had they expected the human to bring about such change. The elders, wise and cautious, exchanged glances, perhaps realizing that this was a moment they would remember for generations. Ethan continued his work with quiet dedication. He adjusted the flow of warmth from the device, measured oxygen levels, and monitored the baby's reflexes. Lyria observed everything, learning as she went. She noticed how his methods combined science, intuition, and patience. There was no rushing, no panic, only a careful, deliberate effort to nurture life back into the fragile child. Time moved differently in this space. Minutes felt like hours, hours like days. Yet the human remained steady, his determination unwavering. Lyria could not help but admire him. Perhaps this was why humans survived in harsh worlds, why they ventured into places where others would not dare. They possessed a resilience and a courage born not just of instinct but of care and understanding. Eventually, the baby began to make stronger movements, stretching tiny arms and cooing more clearly. Lyria's heart soared. Tears streamed down her face, a mixture of relief, joy, and gratitude. She realized she had never known such a feeling, an overwhelming sense of hope rising from the depths of despair. Ethan noticed her emotions and offered a small, gentle nod. Though he could not speak her language, the gesture communicated understanding. He had witnessed loss before, seen grief, and yet he continued to act with compassion. Lyria felt an unspoken bond forming, a connection between species that had begun in sorrow but was now rooted in life and trust. The other Vitherians began to step closer, curious and respectful. They watched silently as the human and the mother worked together to care for the child. Some dared to offer assistance, handing small blankets or gently adjusting devices under Ethan's guidance. Slowly, the community began to understand that this human's presence was not a threat, but a gift. a bridge between what was impossible and what could be achieved. As dawn approached, casting soft pale light across the icy plains, Lyria held her child close. The baby's small heartbeat was strong, its breathing steady. She looked at Ethan, and for the first time she felt a deep trust. Though he was from another world, another species, he had proven that courage, knowledge, and compassion could transcend boundaries. Ethan finally leaned back, resting slightly, though his eyes never left the baby. He had done everything he could for now. The rest would be up to the mother, the community, and the resilience of the child. Yet he had given them the gift of hope, and that was more powerful than anything else. Lyria whispered to her child, words of comfort and love that filled the dome with warmth. The baby responded with soft coos, curling into her embrace. Outside, the wind continued to howl, but inside, the dome was alive with light, warmth, and the quiet miracle of life restored. She turned to Ethan, gesturing toward the horizon, where the pale light of dawn was slowly spreading across the ice. Though she could not speak his language, her gratitude was clear. She placed a hand over her heart, then gently touched his shoulder. The message was simple. He had done more than save her child. He had given her hope. He had shown her that even in the coldest, darkest places, life could return. Ethan nodded, understanding the gesture. He did not need words. Actions had already spoken louder than any language could. In that quiet, shared understanding, a connection was formed, a bond that would last far beyond this frozen planet, a testament to what humans could achieve when they acted with courage and compassion. The other Vitherians began to gather around more openly. Their curiosity mingled with newfound respect. They looked at Ethan not just as a visitor, but as someone extraordinary, capable of bridging worlds. They whispered among themselves, sharing stories that would one day become legend. The story of a human who brought life back to the dead, who defied the limitations of their own species to save a child. Lyria held her child close, feeling warmth spread through her chest in a way she had never known. The despair that had gripped her hours ago was gone, replaced by an overwhelming sense of hope and possibility. She realized that humans, though different in every way, possessed a remarkable gift, the ability to act with selfless courage, to bring life where there was none, and to inspire trust across species. The day had begun in sorrow, but it would end in hope. And in that hope, Lyria knew that her child's life, her own heart, and the future of her people had been changed forever by the quiet, steady hands of a human named Ethan. Days passed on Zithera 9, and the frozen world seemed less hostile than before. Life, fragile and miraculous, had returned to one small corner of the icy plains. Lyria moved carefully through the snowy paths of her village, her child cradled gently in her arms. Each step she took was measured, aware of the child's delicate nature, yet filled with a quiet determination. The human, Ethan, remained nearby. The villagers had allowed him to stay within the dome, recognizing his importance. He did not interfere with Lyria's care of her child, but he was always present, offering advice when asked and assistance when needed. There was a rhythm to their coexistence, one born of mutual respect and trust. The baby, whom Lyria had begun calling Ciora, grew stronger with each passing day. Its eyes, large and luminous, followed Ethan wherever he went, and occasionally, it reached out small hands toward him, cooing in ways that made Lyria smile. There was an unspoken understanding between the human and the child, a connection that transcended language and species. Lyria began to notice changes in the villagers as well. The elders, once skeptical of humans, had started to approach Ethan for guidance. They watched closely as he demonstrated methods to keep the child warm, to regulate nutrition, and to monitor vital signs. Slowly, they began to integrate these techniques into their own practices. Lyria marveled at the effect he had on them. Humans, it seemed, could inspire not only hope but also change. One afternoon, as pale sunlight filtered through the icy dome, Ethan knelt beside Ciora, checking her temperature and adjusting a small device that helped stabilize her breathing. Lyria observed quietly, appreciating the careful precision in his movements. He spoke softly in his own language, explaining what he was doing, though she could not understand the words. Still, the meaning was clear. He cared, he understood, and he wanted to help. Ciora reached out and touched Ethan's hand with her tiny fingers. He looked at her and smiled, gently tapping her palm in return. Lyria felt a warmth in her chest she had not expected. There was something extraordinary in the bond forming before her eyes. It was more than gratitude. It was a trust, a recognition that life and care could extend across species. That evening, a gentle alarm from one of the village sensors signaled an approaching storm. Zithra 9's weather could be deadly, and the villagers moved quickly to secure the domes. Ethan immediately assisted, coordinating with the Vitharians in ways they had not seen before. He directed them to reinforce weak areas, to check supplies, and to ensure that Ciora and other vulnerable children were protected. His calm leadership impressed even the most cautious elders. As the storm raged outside, the village became a small world of warmth and safety. The wind howled, carrying sharp ice particles that struck the domes. Yet inside, life continued, sustained by human ingenuity and Vitharian cooperation. Lyria sat with Ciora, rocking the child gently as Ethan monitored the devices keeping her stable. Occasionally, he looked over at Lyria, offering a reassuring nod. In the quiet moments, Lyria realized something important. This human had not only saved her child, but had shown her people a new way of thinking. Humans were resilient, yes, but they were also inventive, compassionate, and willing to act in ways her people had never imagined. Ethan's presence was more than assistance. It was a lesson in courage and empathy. As the storm raged through the night, Ciora's strength became apparent. She responded more actively to Lyria's touch, even attempting to make sounds that resembled laughter. Lyria's heart swelled with pride and relief. The child who had been lost to the cold and death was now growing, thriving, and full of life. Ethan continued to work tirelessly. He adjusted monitors, checked supplies, and maintained warmth. Lyria noticed that he never rested fully. Even when sitting, his eyes scanned the room, alert to every change. His dedication inspired awe in the Vitharians. They had often relied solely on ancient methods and instinct, but here was a being from another world showing that knowledge, courage, and careful observation could save lives where tradition alone could not. By morning, the storm had passed, leaving the village covered in a fresh layer of snow that sparkled in the pale light. The air was cold, but calm. Lyria held Ciora close, looking at Ethan with gratitude that words could not express. She placed a small hand over her heart, a gesture he seemed to understand. He responded with a quiet nod, his expression one of quiet satisfaction. The other Vitharians approached more openly this time. They observed Ethan with a mix of respect and curiosity, noting how his methods had ensured the survival of the child and the community. The elders, in particular, seemed to recognize something extraordinary in him. They had witnessed death and grief countless times, yet here was a human, showing them a new way to protect life, to care for the vulnerable, and to act with courage when all hope seemed lost. Days turned into weeks. Lyria taught the villagers some of the methods Ethan had used, and together, they adapted them to their unique physiology. Ciora grew stronger each day, reaching small milestones that filled Lyria with joy. Her laughter, soft and musical, became a sound that echoed throughout the dome, a reminder that life had returned in full force. One morning, as Ciora played near the edge of the dome, Ethan knelt beside her, guiding her small hands as she explored a simple toy that demonstrated cause and effect. Lyria watched, realizing that humans had a remarkable ability to teach and nurture. It was not just physical care. They inspired curiosity, encouraged growth, and instilled confidence even in the youngest and most fragile beings. The elders took notice. They began discussing openly how human methods could benefit their entire community, not just Ciora. Ethan's presence had shown them that cooperation and understanding across species could yield results beyond what they had imagined. Lyria felt a surge of pride and hope. Perhaps this was a new beginning, not just for her child, but for her people. As the day drew to a close, the sky above Zithra 9 took on hues of violet and silver, reflecting off the icy plains. Lyria held Ciora close, rocking the child gently. Ethan stood nearby, watching over them, ready to assist at a moment's notice. The village, once quiet and cautious, now buzzed with energy and life. Trust had been built, bonds had been formed, and a new understanding had taken root. Lyria realized that Ethan had not only saved her child but had changed the course of her community's future. His courage, knowledge, and compassion had proven that humans, though different in form and physiology, possessed an extraordinary ability to act selflessly and inspire hope. The bonds formed in these days would last far beyond the immediate crisis. They would become a story, a lesson, a legend told for generations. That night, as the cold wind swept across the icy plains once more, Lyria whispered softly to Siora. The child's tiny hands grasped hers, and for the first time, she felt a complete sense of peace. The fear and grief that had once consumed her heart were replaced by gratitude, hope, and an unshakable trust in the human who had saved her child. Ethan sat quietly beside them, monitoring the devices and ensuring the child remained safe. He did not speak. Words were unnecessary. His actions had already conveyed everything that needed to be said: courage, patience, and unwavering commitment to life. The next day, the villagers held a small gathering to honor what had been achieved. While Lyria was the center of the celebration as a mother who had reclaimed her child, Ethan was recognized silently by all. He did not seek attention or reward, yet his presence was acknowledged through respectful gestures and quiet admiration. The Vitherians had begun to understand that this human was extraordinary, not because of strength or firepower, but because of his heart, mind, and willingness to act in the service of others. Weeks turned into months. Siora continued to grow, stronger, her laughter filling the dome, her curiosity blossoming with each passing day. Lyria observed with awe how her child thrived under the combined care of her people and the human. Ethan's influence extended beyond the child. He had sparked a transformation in the community, teaching them that courage, ingenuity, and empathy could overcome even the most impossible challenges. One evening, as the pale light of the planet's sun filtered through the icy dome, Lyria watched Ethan interact with Siora. The child reached out to him giggling, and he responded with gentle play, guiding her hands and encouraging her to explore the small world around her. Lyria's heart swelled with gratitude. Here was a human who had saved not just her child's life, but the spirit of hope for all of Zithra 9. She realized that this bond, between mother, child, and human, was something rare and extraordinary. It was a connection that transcended species, language, and the boundaries of understanding. In the quiet moments of joy, in the shared laughter and care, Lyria knew that the human had not only brought life back to her child, but had also changed the very heart of her community. And in that realization, she understood something profound. Humans, though young in the galaxy, carried within them the power to inspire, to heal, and to connect worlds in ways that no one else could. Ethan's actions had proven that courage and compassion were not limited to one species. They were universal, capable of bridging even the coldest and most desolate worlds. The icy plains of Zithra 9 glimmered under the soft light of its twin suns, casting long, pale shadows across the domed village. Life had returned in full force, not just within the domes, but in the hearts of those who had witnessed a miracle. The Vitherians had adapted, learning new ways to protect their young and maintain warmth and safety in a world that was otherwise unforgiving. And at the center of it all was Siora, the child who had been brought back from death by a human's courage and skill. Lyria stood outside the dome, her arms cradling Siora as the child explored the snow with tentative steps, her small feet leaving delicate impressions in the soft frost. The child's laughter, clear and musical, echoed across the icy landscape, a sound so full of life it seemed to challenge the harshness of the world itself. Lyria's heart swelled with pride and relief. She could scarcely believe that only weeks ago her child had been lifeless, cold, and still. Now Siora thrived, her energy and curiosity growing each day. Ethan stood nearby, observing quietly. He had become a part of the village's daily rhythm, offering guidance, teaching, and support where needed. Though his own injuries from the crash had mostly healed, he remained vigilant, ensuring that Siora and the other children were safe, that the devices he had installed continued to function, and that the community could maintain their new knowledge. The elders approached, their movement slower but deliberate, carrying a small ceremonial item. It was a crystalline symbol of life, something given only in recognition of extraordinary deeds. They presented it to Ethan without words, their glowing eyes reflecting gratitude, respect, and a recognition of his unique courage. Ethan accepted it humbly, bowing slightly, a gesture of respect and shared understanding. Lyria watched, her chest warm with pride and admiration. Humans, she realized, were capable of acts far beyond what she had imagined. Courage, compassion, and intelligence combined in them in ways that could change worlds. Days passed into weeks, and the bond between human and alien deepened. Ethan had not only saved Siora's life, but had also become a teacher, a mentor, and a symbol of hope for the entire community. Lyria observed as he patiently showed the Vytherians new ways to monitor health, provide warmth, and care for the fragile young. They absorbed his methods eagerly, their skepticism slowly giving way to admiration. One morning, as a pale violet light stretched across the icy plains, Lyria noticed Siora climbing onto a small rise in the snow, pointing excitedly to the horizon. Ethan knelt beside her, holding her small hands, guiding her safely. Lyria approached, smiling. She is ready, she thought. Siora's recovery had reached a point where she could explore her world more fully, and the child's curiosity seemed limitless. The community gathered near the dome, watching with a mixture of pride and amazement. Lyria had never seen so much collective joy. Siora toddled forward, guided by Ethan, her laughter carrying across the snow. The elders murmured quietly among themselves, acknowledging that life had returned not just to a single child, but to the entire village. A sense of unity and renewed hope had been born. As Siora explored, she stumbled slightly on a patch of ice. Ethan caught her gently, steadying her with a careful hand. Lyria's heart skipped a beat, but the incident was minor. The child's resilience shone brightly, and each small triumph over the harsh environment filled Lyria with wonder. Humans, she realized, had a unique ability to adapt and to teach adaptation. It was not brute strength that had saved her child, but intelligence, courage, and empathy, the qualities that made humans exceptional. The days continued, filled with small lessons and discoveries. Ethan showed the Vytherians how to create warmth using minimal resources, how to monitor vital signs in young children, and how to anticipate dangers from the icy terrain. The villagers absorbed this knowledge with eagerness, realizing that they were learning not just to survive but to thrive. Lyria watched these interactions with awe, understanding that her child's life had become a bridge between species. Siora was more than a child. She was a symbol of what humans could bring to alien worlds: hope, knowledge, and the courage to act when all seemed lost. One evening, as the sky above turned shades of violet and gold, Lyria and Ethan walked together across the snowy plains. Siora toddled beside them, clutching her mother's hand and occasionally glancing at Ethan with trust and curiosity. Lyria spoke softly, though Ethan could not understand her words. She explained in her language the depth of her gratitude, the relief she felt, and the hope that had returned to her heart. Ethan nodded, understanding not the words but the emotion behind them. Humans, Lyria realized, had a remarkable ability to communicate through presence, through action, and through the shared experience of caring for life. The twin suns dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the snow. Lyria stopped, holding Siora close. She looked at Ethan and gestured toward the horizon. It was a simple gesture: gratitude, respect, and acknowledgement that their work together had changed everything. Ethan responded with a quiet nod, understanding the depth of the message. As night fell, the village lit up with a soft, warm glow. The dome shimmered like frozen stars, reflecting the sky above. Inside, families gathered, sharing stories of survival, hope, and the human who had changed their lives. The elders spoke openly about the lessons learned from Ethan, about the courage it took to act in the face of despair, and about the importance of compassion and ingenuity. Lyria listened, feeling a deep sense of peace. The bond between their species was no longer tentative. It was real, built on trust, respect, and the shared experience of saving a life. Siora, tired but content, fell asleep in her mother's arms. Lyria stroked her hair gently, marveling at the miracle she held. The child's eyes had once been dull and lifeless, but now they shone with curiosity, intelligence, and joy. Lyria whispered softly, Words of love and promise that Ciora could not yet understand but would feel. Ethan stood nearby, adjusting a small device to ensure the warmth and stability of the dome. He glanced at the sleeping child and then at Lyria. A sense of quiet satisfaction filled him. Humans had always sought challenges, had always explored. But this, saving a life, inspiring hope, bridging worlds, was perhaps the most meaningful act he had ever performed. Over the following weeks, the community began to implement changes inspired by Ethan's presence. New safety measures, teaching methods, and care techniques spread throughout the village. Even the most skeptical elders acknowledged that human ingenuity could complement Vitherian tradition in ways that no one had imagined. Lyria watched proudly as her people embraced this new knowledge, understanding that her child's survival had sparked a transformation that would benefit the entire community for generations. One day, as a gentle snow fell from the sky, Lyria led Ciora and Ethan to the edge of the village. She presented him with a small crystalline artifact, shaped like a delicate star. It was a symbol of life, hope, and gratitude, crafted by the Vitherians to honor those who had changed their world. Ethan accepted it humbly, understanding the honor without needing words. The three of them stood together, looking out across the frozen plains. Lyria felt a deep sense of closure and hope. Her child had survived, her people had learned, and a bond between two very different species had been forged. Ciora reached out to Ethan, touching his hand with trust and recognition. In that moment, Lyria knew that this bond would last, that the story of human courage and compassion would be told across generations. As the twin suns rose once more, casting light across the ice, Lyria whispered softly, "You have given more than life. You have given hope." Ethan only nodded, knowing that actions had spoken louder than any words. In the quiet of the frozen world, a human had changed not just one life, but the course of an entire community. And so, on Scifi 9, life continued, stronger and brighter than before. The baby who had once been lost thrived under the care of her mother, the guidance of a human, and the support of her community. The story of courage, empathy, and ingenuity spread quietly among the Vitherians, a reminder that even in the harshest worlds, hope could return, and life could flourish. In the warmth of the dome, with snow falling softly outside, Lyria held Ciora close and looked at Ethan. A single unspoken truth connected them. Humans, with their compassion, courage, and ingenuity, were a force that could heal, inspire, and change the galaxy. And on that frozen, distant planet, that truth had been proven in the most extraordinary way.